The storm outside did not roar. It pressed. Snow stacked against the windows of Denver International, muting the glow of runway lights until the glass itself looked like frosted stone. Announcements looped over the loudspeakers, the same two words flashing on every departure board in red letters that seemed to mock the restless crowd. Delayed, canceled, delayed. Passengers groaned, cursed, laughed nervously at jokes that weren't funny. Children sprawled across carry-ons like abandoned luggage themselves. Couples argued in low voices about missed connections and ruined plans. Business travelers stabbed at their phones in frustration, trying to salvage meetings that were already lost. The airport had turned into a waiting room without a clock, a limbo where time moved but nothing changed. Through the sliding doors of Concourse B, a figure stepped in from the jet bridge. Vincent Russo moved with the calm stride of someone used to rooms that went silent when he entered. At 39, he carried himself with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. His dark overcoat was tailored perfectly, his shoes polished despite the slush outside, and a simple gold ring bearing his family crest caught the overhead lights as he adjusted the strap of his leather bag. He didn't look like the other travelers. There was something in his posture, in the way his eyes swept the terminal with measured attention, that set him apart. People stepped aside without realizing why. Security nodded respectfully as he passed. The world bent around him in small, unspoken ways. Vincent removed the small earpiece he'd been wearing and tucked it into his pocket. For the first time that day, he listened not to Salvatore's updates or the careful negotiations happening across state lines, but to the raw clamor of people stranded together by weather they couldn't control. He could have retreated to one of the private lounges where airport management kept space for men like him, ordered whiskey, made calls in rooms where conversations weren't overheard. But something tugged him forward, an impulse he could not name and did not trust. Then he saw them. A woman in a simple winter coat sat near gate C-23, her shoulders curved protectively around three small figures. Three identical boys pressed close against her, their sneakers swinging above the floor in perfect unison. They each held a packet of crackers, the kind airlines handed out as if they counted for dinner. Their faces were tired, their clothes worn but clean, their presence somehow both ordinary and impossible. Vincent's breath locked in his chest. He knew the curve of that woman's shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she thought no one was watching, the particular tilt of her head when she was trying not to cry. Maya. For 7 years, he had not spoken her name aloud. 7 years since she had walked out of his life caring more than he realized. 7 years since he'd told himself it was better this way, that his world was no place for someone like her. Now she looked up, and their eyes met across the terminal. In that instant, the air between them froze harder than in the storm outside, and then he saw the boys clearly. 3 sets of brown eyes, sharp jawlines even at their young age, restless energy contained by exhaustion. Triplets, every feature was his, repeated 3 times over like an accusation written in flesh and blood. Vincent gripped the handle of his bag tighter. He had sat across tables from men who killed for less than respect. He had made decisions that changed lives without flinching. None of it had shaken him the way this sight did. He stepped forward, his voice barely more than a breath. Maya. She rose slowly, placing herself between him and the boys like a shield. Her reply was cold, even, each word chosen like a blade drawn carefully from its sheath. You should walk alone, Vincent. No one here needs you. The triplets looked around her shoulders with unblinking eyes. The storm wailed against the glass like something alive and angry. Somewhere above, another announcement declared the obvious. All flights delayed until further notice. Vincent Russo, a man whose word carried weight in rooms most people would never see, stood rooted to the tile floor. He was undone not by rival families or federal investigations, but by the family he had never known was his. The storm rattled against the glass walls, snow sweeping across the runway like white smoke trying to erase the world. Inside, the terminal buzzed with restless movement, suitcases dragged across tile, children crying, announcements echoing over and over until the words lost all meaning. All flights remained delayed. Vincent didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on Maya, On the way, she shifted her stance to keep herself squarely between him and the boys. The triplets clung to her coat, their gazes darting back and forth between their mother and the stranger who looked too much like them to be coincidence. Vincent drew a breath, steadying his voice. Maya, they're mine, aren't they? Her chin lifted, defiance in every line of her body. Don't, not here. I deserve an answer. What you deserve, she cut in, voice low but sharp enough to draw blood, is the truth you chose to miss 7 years ago. I was in a hospital bed alone, giving birth to 3 boys. You were handling business that couldn't wait. Don't act surprised now. The words hit harder than any accusation he had faced in rooms where men bargained with lives. Vincent swallowed, his throat dry. He glanced at the boys, their mirrored faces, restless feet, nervous hands gripping snack packs like lifelines. His chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with loss. Maya, he tried again, softer this time, the kind of tone he rarely used. Let me at least say hello. She shook her head, and for a moment, he saw past the anger to the exhaustion underneath. You don't get to walk in after 7 years and decide you're a father. They're not a business deal you can negotiate. They're my sons. Her voice cracked faintly on that last line, but she held firm. The boys pressed closer to her legs, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand the words. Vincent's hand dropped to his side, fingers curling into a fist. He had built his life on control, on reading rooms, and knowing exactly when to speak and when to let silence do the work. Yet here, every instinct told him he had no leverage, no angle, no way to fix what had been broken so long ago. Then a flash, a camera phone lifted from across the waiting area, angled toward them. Someone zoomed in, snapping a shot of Vincent Russo standing face to face with a woman and 3 boys who looked just like him. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. The photo spread to another screen, then another. Shared, whispered about, posted online where it would travel faster than any flight could. Words formed like sparks catching dry grass. Russo's secret family. 3 identical boys spotted at Denver airport. Within minutes, the news was out of the terminal, climbing into the storm of the internet where nothing ever stayed buried. Vincent's phone vibrated against his chest. He didn't need to look to know who it was. Salvatore, his consigliere, the man who had kept the organization running smoothly for 20 years. The man who would tell him to walk away before this became a problem they couldn't contain. Maya saw the look on his face and knew. Her eyes narrowed, anger flaring fresh. And here it comes, the headlines, the gossip, the cameras, exactly why I never wanted you near them. The triplets shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension sharpening in the air. One tugged her sleeve, his voice small and worried. Mom, can we go home now? Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle despite the steel in her spine. Soon, she whispered, then looked up at Vincent with fire in her eyes. You've already done enough damage. Don't make this worse. Vincent's phone buzzed again, insistent as a wasp trapped against glass. He ignored it. For once, the business could wait. The organization could hold. He wasn't leaving this space. Not when the truth of 7 years was standing right in front of him, alive and undeniable and wearing his face 3 times over. The waiting area grew louder, not with boarding calls, but with whispers that multiplied like rumors in a small town. Screens lit up with headlines that had traveled faster than the snowstorm outside. Passengers pointed, some discreet, others bold enough to lift their phones again for another shot. Vincent ignored the vibration in his pocket, but the look on Maya's face cut deeper than any threat he'd ever received. Her jaw was set, her hand pressed firmly against the back of one of the boys, as if shielding him from the world itself. Congratulations, she said quietly, her voice edged with steel. You've just handed them a story that will follow these kids for the rest of their lives. Vincent's chest tightened. I didn't ask for this. Maya's eyes flashed, bright and furious. No, but you created it. Every camera in this terminal sees you, not them. To the world, they'll never be children. They'll be your scandal, your secret, your mistake. Before Vincent could respond, the loudspeaker crackled overhead, harsh and mechanical. Attention passengers, all flights remain delayed until further notice. Please remain in your designated areas. Groans filled the terminal like a collective sigh of defeat. The storm outside wasn't moving, and neither was the one inside. The triplets huddled closer to their mother, restless now. One tugged at her sleeve, his voice uncertain. Another whispered, "Mom, why are people staring?" She bent down, her voice soft for them alone, a tenderness that made Vincent's throat tight. Because people are bored and have nothing better to do, ignore it. But ignoring was impossible. A man in a business suit walked closer, holding out his phone like a weapon. "Mr. Russo, is this your family?" His voice carried intentionally, loud enough for others to hear, to record, to spread. Maya shot to her feet, her movements sharp. "We're done here." She reached for the handle of her carry-on, ready to move the boys away from the growing attention, from the cameras, from Vincent and everything he represented. Vincent stepped forward instinctively. "Maya, wait." She cut him off without turning, her voice flat and final. "Don't follow us." But the crowd did. They didn't care about her warning or her privacy. They cared about the man whose name whispered through certain circles, whose presence in Denver meant something was happening, even if they didn't know what. At that moment, Vincent's phone lit up again, and this time he answered. Salvatore's voice burst through, sharp and urgent, the kind of tone reserved for emergencies. "Vincent, what in God's name is going on? There are photos everywhere. Our partners are calling. If you don't control this now, everything we've built is at risk." Vincent glanced around. Dozens of eyes, flashes, whispers spreading like wildfire. None of this was controllable. Not anymore. The carefully maintained distance between his world and the public eye had just shattered like glass under pressure. He lowered his voice, turning slightly away from the crowd. "Salvatore, I'll handle it." "You'd better," Salvatore snapped, his frustration bleeding through. "Because right now, people are asking questions we can't afford to answer. This isn't just personal, Vincent. It's dangerous for everyone." The line clicked dead. Vincent lowered the phone, staring across the terminal. Maya was sitting again, her posture rigid but tired, the boys curled into her sides like birds sheltering from a storm. She hadn't run. Not yet. The storm outside rattled the windows again, but Vincent knew the real storm was already here. It was in the cameras, in the headlines forming in real time, in the way his carefully separated worlds had just collided with the force of a train wreck. And for the first time in years, the decision he faced wasn't about territory or alliances or maintaining control. It was about whether he would keep walking toward the woman and the children who had every reason to hate him, or retreat back into the shadows where he had always been most comfortable. Vincent took a step forward. Vincent had taken that first step toward Maya and the boys when a sudden burst of light exploded across the terminal. A paparazzo, braver or more reckless than the rest, had leaned over a barrier, snapping rapid shots of the triplets at Maya's side. "Look this way! Just one photo!" the man shouted, his camera flashing again and again like lightning trapped indoors. Maya shot up, her hands stretched protectively across her children. "Stop!" Her voice cracked through the terminal, raw and sharp. But the man ignored her, stepping closer with his lens aimed directly at the boys. The triplets pressed against her, frightened by the noise and the strangers closing in. One of them buried his face in her coat. The others clung to her arms, their small bodies trembling. Vincent moved instinctively. He closed the distance in long strides, placing himself between the photographer and his family. His voice, when it came, was controlled, but carried an edge that made the air feel colder. "Delete those pictures now." The man smirked, lowering the camera just slightly. "They're already uploaded, Russo. The world's seen them, and they'll pay good money to see more." Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. Cameras turned toward them, recording the confrontation, feeding it into the endless appetite of the internet. Maya's shoulders trembled with fury. "Do you see?" she said, her voice breaking. "This is what your world does. It doesn't care who gets crushed." Before Vincent could answer, security rushed over, ushering the photographer away with warnings that sounded more like suggestions. But the damage was done. Dozens of other passengers had their phones raised now, some recording, some snapping pictures, their whispers rising into a hum that filled the hall like static. Maya gathered the boys closer, her face pale but determined. She whispered, though her words carried enough for Vincent to hear. This ends the moment we leave. When the storm lifts, we're gone for good. Vincent felt the words like a blow to the chest, but at that very moment, his phone vibrated again. Salvatore's name glowing on the screen like a warning light. He didn't need to answer to know the message. Control it or lose everything. He pocketed the phone without a word. His gaze swept back to the three small faces peeking out from behind their mother's arms. Fear, confusion, and something else flickered there. Curiosity, maybe, or the beginning of a question they were too young to ask. For years, Vincent had been untouchable, moving through a world where his word was law and his presence commanded respect born of fear. He had never paused long enough to see what he'd lost in the process. But now, with the storm outside locking them all together in this glass and steel cage, he realized there was no deal big enough, no alliance strong enough to shield him from the truth standing before him. He lowered himself slightly, just enough to meet the boys' eyes over their mother's shoulder. His voice was softer now, stripped of the authority he usually carried, leaving only something raw and honest underneath. You don't need to be afraid. No one's going to hurt you. Not while I'm here. Maya stiffened, her body tensing as if preparing to reject the promise. But she didn't stop him. She didn't pull the boys away. And though the crowd still buzzed, though Salvatore's calls still lit his phone like an alarm he couldn't silence, though the storm outside showed no sign of breaking, something had shifted. For the first time in years, Vincent hadn't chosen the business. He hadn't chosen control or strategy or the careful maintenance of his reputation. He had chosen them. The waiting area pulsed with energy now, not the anxious energy of delayed flights, but something sharper. People whispered his name like he was both spectacle and scandal. A man whose privacy had just been stripped away in the most public way possible. Security had cleared the first paparazzo, but the damage spiraled online faster than any attempt to contain it. On the giant screen above the gate, where flight statuses blinked in red, someone had pulled up a news feed. A headline sprawled across it in bold letters that felt like an accusation. Russo's secret family. 3 identical boys spotted at Denver airport. Maya's breath hitched. She pulled her hood lower over her face, but it was useless. Dozens of eyes were locked on her and the children. The boys pressed against her legs, frightened by the growing attention, by the way strangers stared as if they were exhibits in a museum. Vincent stood rooted, watching the headline burn across the screen. For years, his life had been built on careful separation. The business stayed in the shadows, his personal life non-existent by design. Now, one storm, one photograph, and the walls between those worlds had collapsed. His phone buzzed again. Salvatore. This time he answered, stepping slightly away from Maya and the boys. Salvatore's voice snapped through the line, sharp and cold as winter steel. Vincent, you need to walk away right now. Do not speak. Do not look at them. I'll arrange security to escort you out, and will deny everything. Vincent glanced at Maya, who held the boys tighter, her face pale but fierce. Walk away. The words clawed at him, echoing the very mistake that had broken them years ago. No, Vincent said simply, his voice quiet but final. Silence on the line. Then Salvatore's voice rose, incredulous. Do you understand what you're throwing away? We've spent years building connections, maintaining respect. You're about to destroy it over 3 kids we don't even know for certain are yours. Vincent's reply was steady, though his pulse thundered in his ears. I know enough. They're mine. More silence, then Salvatore's fury spilled out like poison. Then you've chosen chaos. Don't expect me to clean it up. The call ended abruptly, leaving only the dial tone and the echo of consequences Vincent hadn't fully considered. Maya turned toward him, her eyes blazing with something between anger and fear. What did he say? That I should walk away. Vincent held her gaze without flinching. I didn't. For the first time, Maya faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came. The boys looked between them, sensing something unspoken but important was happening in the space their mother and this stranger occupied. An announcement broke the silence, mechanical and indifferent. Attention passengers. Due to severe weather, all departures remain delayed indefinitely. Please remain inside the terminal. The storm outside roared louder, rattling the glass like it wanted in. But for Vincent, The storm inside was louder still, the one that asked whether he was willing to face the consequences of finally choosing something that mattered more than control. Maya exhaled sharply, her voice brittle but controlled. Then you better learn fast, Vincent, because if you're going to stand here in this mess, you don't get to hide behind your reputation anymore. These are children, not business associates. The boys tugged at her sleeve, hungry and restless. With the food court nearly emptied and most vendors closed for the night, Maya hesitated. Then she shoved a bag of snacks into Vincent's hands, her movements sharp with challenge. Prove it, she said flatly. Start with something as simple as it's feeding your sons. Vincent froze for a beat, the words sinking deeper than she knew. He looked down at the three pairs of identical eyes staring back at him. Not employees, not allies, not pieces on a board he could move at will. Sons. He crouched slowly, opening the bag with hands that had signed agreements worth millions, but had never done something as ordinary as this. He offered the crackers carefully, as if approaching something fragile that might shatter under too much pressure. The smallest boy reached first, his tiny fingers brushing Vincent's palm. Then the others followed, their movements cautious but curious. It wasn't much, just a snack in a storm. But it was a beginning. From across the concourse, a man in a heavy coat pushed forward, microphone in hand, a cameraman right behind him. His voice rang out sharp, carrying across the stranded passengers like a challenge thrown into a quiet room. Mr. Russo, is it true you abandoned this family? Did you even know these children existed? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones shot up, recording from every angle. The boys shrank against Maya's legs, their small bodies trembling. The noise, the lights, the strangers, it was too much, too fast. Vincent's jaw tightened. He had faced hostile negotiations, courtroom inquiries, men who wanted him dead. None of it compared to this. 3 children, looking to him for safety, while the world demanded answers he wasn't sure how to give. Security guards tried to push the reporter back, but there were too few of them, overwhelmed by weather delays in a terminal full of restless passengers who suddenly had something more interesting than flight delays to watch. Flashbulbs flared again and again, slicing through the dim light like knives. Maya's patience snapped. Her voice cut low and furious, meant for Vincent, but loud enough to ride over the chaos. This, she hissed, is exactly why I never wanted you near them. Vincent turned toward her. She wasn't wrong. His presence had always drawn attention, and now it was swallowing the boys whole, exposing them to a scrutiny no child should face. But he didn't retreat. Instead, he stepped in front of Maya and the children, squaring his shoulders against the cameras. His voice was steady, deliberate, carrying the kind of authority that made rooms go quiet. I will answer your questions, Vincent said, eyes locked on the reporter. But not here. Not with my children in the middle of this circus. The words slipped out before he could stop them. My children. Maya stiffened. The triplets' eyes widened, as if hearing something impossible made real. The crowd murmured, the sound rising like a wave breaking against shore. The reporter pressed closer, relentless. So you admit they're yours? Vincent didn't flinch. His gaze was cold, measured, the kind of look that had ended arguments before they started. I admit they deserve better than this, better than cameras in their faces and strangers treating them like entertainment. He gestured sharply to security, his tone brooking no argument. Clear a room. Now. The guards, emboldened by his authority or perhaps afraid of what might happen if they didn't comply, began moving people back. The crowd resisted at first, but Vincent's presence, silent, immovable, made them hesitate. Yet the damage was already rippling online. Tweets, live streams, headlines forming in real time, spreading faster than any storm could travel. Maya's breath came fast, fury still burning in her eyes. But beneath it, there was something else. Conflict, confusion. The faintest crack in the wall she'd built over 7 years. The boys clung to her hands, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Vincent caught their gaze briefly, then lowered his eyes as if to tell them without words. You don't have to be afraid. Not anymore. The concourse lights flickered under the storm's pressure, and outside, Snow kept pounding the glass like fists demanding entry. But inside, all eyes were fixed on Vincent Russo, watching to see if the man who had spent his life in shadows would finally step into the light. Security had cleared a small lounge, but reporters kept pressing forward, phones lifted, live streams rolling. The headline was already everywhere, spreading through social media like wildfire through dry brush. Russo family scandal. CEO confronted at Denver airport. Vincent stood in front of the crowd, still in his travel-worn coat, but the weight on his shoulders made him look like a different man. Maya stood behind him, arms crossed tight, shielding the boys. Their wide eyes peeked from behind her coat, watching their father as if trying to measure who he really was. Vincent's phone buzzed in his pocket, Salvatore's name glowing on the screen. He didn't need to answer to hear the warning. This is spiraling. If you don't shut it down, we lose everything. Walk away now. Vincent lowered the phone without answering. For the first time in years, he didn't obey that voice, didn't calculate the costs before acting. He looked at the reporters, at the cameras pointed at him like weapons. His chest rose, then steadied. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried across the terminal with the weight of confession. 7 years ago, Vincent began, I made choices that cost me more than I understood at the time. I missed the birth of my children because I thought business mattered more. Because I believed the world I lived in was more important than the life I could have had. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing every word, every flicker of emotion on his face. Maya's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the blunt honesty. She had expected denial, deflection, the careful words of a man trained never to admit weakness. Not this, Vincent continued, his voice steady but raw underneath, like something long buried finally breaking surface. I didn't know they were here today. I didn't even know they existed. But now I do, and I won't pretend otherwise. I won't hide them or treat them like a mistake to be managed. A reporter shot back quickly, sensing blood in the water. So what are you saying, Mr. Russo? Are you abandoning your business for them? Vincent glanced over his shoulder. The three boys clutched each other, their faces pale from fear and fatigue. Then his eyes met Maya's. For the first time, she didn't look like an adversary. She looked like someone silently asking if he'd really stand where he'd never stood before. His answer was simple, but it struck like thunder in a quiet room. I'm saying I'm their father before anything else. Before business, before the family name, before every deal I've ever made. Flashbulbs exploded. Some gasps turned into scattered applause from stranded passengers who recognized something honest in a world that rarely offered it. Salvatore's silence on the other end of that unanswered call was louder than any shout. Behind Vincent, Maya's arms loosened slightly around the boys. For years, she had only seen him choose business, choose control, choose the shadows over the light. Now, in the middle of a snowbound terminal with the world watching, he had chosen something else. The echo of Vincent's words still hung in the air when his phone buzzed again. A new notification lit the screen, one headline after another scrolling past like accusations. Only this time the angle had shifted, the narrative twisting in a new direction. Russo's ex hid children for 7 years. Was airport scene staged? Maya froze as a reporter shoved a tablet toward her face, the article already spreading online like poison through water. The piece was vicious, calculated. It claimed she had concealed the children deliberately, that she was now exploiting them for financial leverage, that the entire confrontation had been orchestrated for maximum publicity. Her chest tightened. She turned instinctively to shield the boys as camera shutters snapped in her direction, capturing her shock, her anger, her fear. Across the room, Vincent's jaw locked. He recognized the strategy immediately, the kind of move Salvatore would make to protect the organization, to shift blame away from Vincent and onto someone more vulnerable. Mr. Russo, another reporter pressed forward, emboldened by the new narrative. Is it true the mother hid your children all these years? Did she keep them from you to force the settlement? The boys flinched at the harsh tone, at the accusations directed toward their mother. One of them clutched Maya's sleeve, his voice small and scared. Mama? She bent low, whispering urgently, don't listen. Stay close to me. Vincent stepped forward, raising his hand in a gesture that silenced the crowd more effectively than any shout could have. His voice cut clean through the chaos, sharp and final. "Stop!" The room went quiet, stunned by the sudden command. "None of you were there," Vincent continued, his voice steady but edged with something dangerous. "None of you know what it cost her to raise them alone. None of you have any right to judge choices you don't understand." The cameras caught every word, every syllable. Maya's head turned sharply toward him, surprise flickering across her face. For years, she had braced for him to dismiss her, to paint her as bitter or opportunistic. Instead, in front of strangers and cameras, he was drawing the fire onto himself. Vincent didn't waver. His gaze swept the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. "If anyone failed here, it was me. I wasn't there when I should have been. But don't twist this into her fault. She carried what I left behind, and these children deserve better than your headlines." The silence cracked under the weight of those words. Some passengers nodded, murmuring quiet agreement. The narrative that had been building against Maya faltered, losing momentum as Vincent refused to let it stand. Salvatore's strategy had been clear: destroy Maya's credibility to salvage the organization's reputation. But Vincent had just turned the spotlight back on himself, breaking the script, choosing truth over tactics. For the first time that night, the cameras weren't just feeding on scandal. They were capturing something rarer in Vincent's world: accountability without calculation, honesty without angle. Maya's arms tightened around the triplets, but her eyes flickered with something new. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a fracture in the wall she had built, a space where doubt could become something else if given time. The storm outside refused to let up, pressing against the glass like it wanted to crush the building under its weight. The airport felt like a city trapped under a dome, thousands of lives suspended in restless limbo. The boys had fallen half asleep in plastic chairs, their small heads resting on Maya's lap. She smoothed back Finn's hair absent-mindedly, her body tense despite the quiet moment. Her eyes kept darting to the screens overhead, watching the headlines shift and multiply. Vincent sat opposite, his coat draped over his shoulders, his face lined with exhaustion. His phone had finally stopped buzzing, whether because Salvatore had given up or because the damage was already done, he couldn't tell. Every hour, the delay grew longer. Every hour, the pressure mounted like water rising behind a dam. Maya caught his gaze across the small space and said flatly, "You can still walk away. Pretend none of this happened. Go back to your world before it's too late." Her words stung, but Vincent leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "And leave you to carry this alone. Not this time." Before she could respond, an announcement crackled through the loudspeakers, sharp and sudden. "Attention passengers. Limited boarding will resume shortly at Gate 14. The concourse erupted. Passengers scrambled for their bags, dragging children and luggage toward the gate in a chaotic surge. The sudden movement jolted the boys awake. One clutched his toy plane. Another rubbed his eyes. Finn, still groggy, blinked at the commotion with confusion. Maya stood quickly, determination hardening her features. She pulled the handle of her suitcase up with one hand and gathered the boys with the other. "We're leaving," she said, her voice firm, "before this gets worse." Vincent rose too, his voice urgent but controlled. "Maya, don't. Let's go together, please." But she shook her head, her expression closing like a door slamming shut. "You had your chance years ago. Tonight proved one thing. The closer we stand to you, the more the world tears us apart." Her words hit him harder than Salvatore's threats, harder than any consequence his choices might bring. He opened his mouth, but no reply came that could undo 7 years of absence. The family moved with the crowd toward the security checkpoint. The line snaked forward, voices buzzing, feet shuffling on tile. For a moment, it looked almost ordinary, just another family trying to get home. Until it wasn't. Finn's hand slipped from Maya's grip. In the crush of bodies surging toward the gate, he stumbled backward, swept sideways, swallowed by the stream of passengers funneling toward different corridors. His small figure disappeared behind rolling suitcases and hurrying legs. "Finn!" Maya's voice cracked like glass breaking. She whipped her head, left, right, her heart hammering against her ribs. She yanked the other two boys closer, her breath coming fast. "Finn!" The name sliced through the air, urgent and raw. Passengers turned, some frowning, others whispering. A woman muttered, "Careless mother. Those kids shouldn't be here." The words burned Maya's ears, shame mixing with panic in a toxic blend. She shoved forward, scanning the hall desperately, her breath short and ragged. Vincent's instincts kicked in immediately. He dropped his bag, pushing against the tide of people with the kind of focused intensity he usually reserved for crisis. "Finn!" His voice was louder, commanding, carrying across the terminal like an order that demanded obedience. Somewhere beyond the crowd, a small sob answered, the faint sound of a child lost and afraid. Maya's chest tightened, tears welling despite her will to stay strong. She had held everything together for years, worked double shifts, sacrificed sleep, carried the weight of 3 children alone. But in that moment, she felt it slipping through her fingers like sand. The judgment, the cameras, the storm, all of it faded, replaced by the single thought pounding in her mind like a drumbeat. Find my son. And Vincent, running, searching, fighting against strangers who didn't care, was the one charging into the chaos to bring him back. "Finn!" Vincent's voice boomed over the noise, deeper than the chatter, sharper than the rolling announcements that echoed through the terminal. He pushed against the stream of passengers, scanning every corner, every shadow, his eyes cutting through the chaos with focused precision. Finn's small sobs echoed faintly, muffled and distant, swallowed by the shuffle of luggage wheels and hurried footsteps. The boy had drifted past the rope barrier, lost in the current of strangers funneling towards security. His small body was invisible in the sea of adults who moved without seeing him. Maya's heart hammered as she clutched the twins close, her knuckles white around the suitcase handle. "Vincent!" she cried, her voice breaking on his name. "Find him!" For a man who had once commanded rooms with a glance, who had made decisions that shaped lives without flinching, the sight of him now, shoulders hunched, coat disheveled, weaving desperately through the crowd, was something no camera could spin into anything but raw, human desperation. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't control. This was a father searching for his son. A flash of movement near a vending machine. A small figure crouched low, hugging his knees, his face buried in his arms. Finn's toy plane lay on the floor beside him, forgotten. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. Vincent dropped to his knees, breathless, his voice softening to something tender and broken. "Finn, it's me, it's Dad." The boy's head lifted slowly, his face streaked with tears. His eyes were wide, frightened, full of a question no child should have to ask. "You'll leave again. Mama said you weren't there before." The words struck Vincent harder than any accusation, any headline, any consequence his choices might bring. He swallowed against the tightness in his throat, forcing air into his lungs. "You're right," Vincent said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I wasn't there when you came into this world. I should have been. But I'm here now, and I won't leave you again. Not ever." He reached out, palms open, steady despite everything. "I promise you, Finn. I'm staying." Finn hesitated, tears pooling in his eyes. His small body trembled with the weight of fear and hope tangled together. Then with a choked sob, he launched forward, burying his face in Vincent's chest. Vincent wrapped his arms around him, holding tight as if anchoring them both against a world that wanted to pull them apart. For a fleeting second, the noise of the airport faded. The announcements, the crowd, the cameras. It was just a father and his son, finding each other in the middle of chaos. Maya pushed through the last of the crowd, breathless, the twins tugging at her hands. When she saw Finn clinging to Vincent, something inside her cracked open. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She had spent 7 years building walls to protect her children from disappointment, from abandonment, from the kind of pain she'd carried alone. But this was different. Vincent stood slowly, lifting Finn against his shoulder. The boy's arms wrapped tight around his neck, refusing to let go. Vincent's voice carried across the small space between them, firm but tender. "We go together, all of us." The concourse stilled. Passengers who had muttered "careless mother" a moment before now watched in silence, some with softened eyes, others turning away as if witnessing something too private for strangers. Cameras clicked, but for once, the lens wasn't capturing scandal. It was recording something that couldn't be staged or manufactured, a family broken apart finding its way back together. Maya's eyes met Vincent's across the distance. For years, she had only seen ambition in his gaze, calculation in his choices. Tonight, she saw something different. A father who had chosen his child before the world, before his reputation, before everything he'd spent his life building. And for the first time in 7 years, she didn't look away. Vincent still held Finn in his arms when they returned to Maya and the twins. The boy's tiny fists clung to his father's shirt as though letting go meant losing him again. The twins pressed close to Maya's legs, their eyes wide with relief and lingering fear. For a long moment, the family stood together in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by strangers and cameras, but somehow apart from all of it. The storm had forced the world to pause. And in that pause, something fundamental had shifted. Maya searched Vincent's face. His coat was wrinkled, his hair disheveled from running, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. This was not the man who had once left her waiting in a hospital bed while he handled business that couldn't wait. This was a father who had just run through chaos for his son. Vincent shifted Finn gently into one arm and reached for the suitcase with the other. His voice was quiet but certain. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Maya's lips trembled. She wanted to argue, to remind him of promises broken and years lost. But instead, the words that came out were barely a whisper. "Don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," Vincent replied, his gaze steady and unflinching. "Not to them, not to you." And this time, against every instinct she'd built to protect herself, she believed him. Hours later, the storm began to break. The snow lightened, visibility improved, and flights were slowly rescheduled. The departure board began showing green again instead of red. Lines shuffled forward as passengers collected their things and moved toward gates that had finally opened. But when their turn came, when Maya held the boarding passes in her hand, Vincent placed a gentle hand on her arm most before she could move forward. "Come with me," he said softly. "Not as strangers heading separate ways, as family." Maya hesitated, the boarding gate glowing behind her like an escape route, like the safety she'd known for 7 years. But then Finn tugged her sleeve, his small voice cutting through her doubt. "Mama, I want to stay with Dad." The twins nodded, their voices soft but steady, echoing their brother's plea. "Me too." Maya's throat tightened. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 7 years pressing against the possibility of something different. When she opened them again, she found Vincent watching, waiting not with pressure or expectation, but with hope. She gave a small nod, lowering the tickets. "Okay." And just like that, the plane took off without them. Spring sunlight poured across the backyard weeks later, washing away the memory of snow and storms. The triplets raced barefoot through grass that had finally turned green, their laughter carrying like music across the open space. A kite dipped and soared above them, tangling briefly in the branches of an old oak before climbing free again. Maya leaned against the porch railing, her hair loose and brushed back by the warm breeze. She no longer carried the same exhaustion in her eyes, the same weight of being everything to everyone. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to simply watch her children play without calculating the cost of every moment. Vincent stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee, setting one by her hand. His tie was gone, sleeves rolled up, the sharp edges of his old life softened by something he had never known he was missing. "They've been at it since morning," Maya said, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she watched the boys chase each other in circles. "Let them," Vincent replied, his voice warm. "This is the sound I've been missing my whole life." She turned to study him, her gaze searching for cracks in the foundation, for signs that the old patterns might return. But what she found was steadier than she expected. He had kept his promises. He had shown up. Day after day, he had chosen them. "And when the next crisis calls," she asked quietly, "when Salvatore needs you for something that can't wait?" Vincent met her eyes without hesitation. "Then I tell them my family is non-negotiable." Silence lingered between them, not heavy or uncertain, but tender. Slowly, Vincent reached for her hand. For a heartbeat, Maya considered pulling away as she had countless times before, protecting herself from the possibility of disappointment. But this time, she didn't. Their fingers intertwined, a quiet promise stronger than any headline, more binding than any contract. The triplets' laughter echoed across the yard, filling the air like an answer to a question neither of them had known how to ask. The world had once caught them in the harsh light of scandal, trapped them in a storm that threatened to tear everything apart. But if anyone looked now, they would only see what had always been missing. A family finding its way home, piece by fragile piece, built on second chances and the courage to choose differently. Vincent squeezed her hand gently, and Maya squeezed back. In the distance, Finn called out for his father to watch him fly the kite higher. Vincent smiled, called back that he was watching, that he would always be watching now. And for the first time in 7 years, that promise felt like something solid enough to build a life on. True success is not measured by what we achieve, but by who stands beside us when the storm finally passes. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If it touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Every day, we bring you powerful cinematic stories of love, courage, and redemption. Stay tuned. Tomorrow's story may move you even more.